I had been in the city for barely a month, and already it felt like I was getting lost every other day. Between work, meetings, and trying to get used to the endless concrete jungle, my sense of direction was completely shot. The streets blurred together, and no matter how many times I checked my map app, it never seemed to take me where I needed to go. I had tried every navigation tool out there, but none of them seemed to work for me. One afternoon, after missing yet another meeting because of some obscure back alley, I was on the verge of losing it. Frustrated, I was scrolling through my phone, hoping to find something that would make my life easier. That's when I stumbled upon it. A new app, Whisper Route. The description caught my attention. The fastest, most efficient way to navigate your city. Personalized routes based on your habits. It was all I needed to hear. I downloaded it right away, not even bothering to read the reviews. At this point, I'd try anything. The first time I opened the app, it looked no different from the others. A simple interface, a search bar to type in destinations. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was skeptical, but desperate. I input the address for my next meeting, just a few blocks away, and hit Start. The voice came through my speakers almost immediately. Turn left in 50 feet. It was a woman's voice, calm and clear. So far, so normal. But as I made the turn, I noticed something strange. The app didn't just tell me where to go. It started recommending routes I had never even considered. Rather than taking the main road, it told me to turn onto a quiet side street, then another, weaving through areas I'd never noticed before. At first, I thought it was just a quirky suggestion to avoid traffic, but when I looked around, I realized something odd. The streets were completely empty. No cars, no pedestrians. I wasn't used to the city feeling so quiet. As I followed the directions, a small part of me felt uneasy, but I shrugged it off. Maybe I had just never paid attention to these back streets before. The more I used Whisper Route, the more I noticed how it seemed to know exactly where I was going. It didn't just offer directions, it guided me like someone watching over my shoulder, helping me avoid delays, suggesting shortcuts and making my commute feel almost effortless. But then, something strange happened. The voice in the app changed. Turn right in 100 feet, it said. But this time there was something else, a faint whisper, barely audible, almost like someone was breathing into the phone. I frowned, unsure if I was just imagining it. The voice repeated the instruction, but the whisper was there again. A soft, unintelligible murmur, like a distant voice. I pulled the phone closer, trying to hear, but as soon as I looked away, it stopped. I chalked it up to a glitch in the app, maybe some weird bug or background noise. The voice seemed normal again, and I shook off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Later that evening, as I was walking back to my apartment, I decided to test Whisper Route again. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the city felt colder and emptier. I didn't expect to hear the whisper this time, but as the voice came through my phone once more, I heard it again. This time, it was clearer. Turn left, Sarah. I froze. It said my name. The app had never had access to my contacts and never asked for permission to use my information. How did it know my name? I quickly checked the settings. No personal information was listed. There was nothing in the app that should have allowed it to address me directly. Yet, the voice on the other end knew exactly who I was. For a brief moment, I felt a cold knot in my stomach. But then, the voice continued, "Turn left, Sarah, it's faster." Shaken, I obeyed, though I couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. The whispers were starting to feel too personal, like something or someone was watching me. But I didn't delete the app. Something kept me using it. Maybe I was just tired of getting lost. Maybe I was just curious. But I couldn't ignore the voice in my head telling me that Whisper Route was more than it seemed. And, for better or worse, I was beginning to rely on it more than ever before. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The whispers weren't just guiding me, they were leading me somewhere. The next few days felt like a blur of whispers. Every time I used WhisperRoot, the app seemed to know more about me. It wasn't just giving directions anymore, it was guiding me through my life. I'd leave my apartment, and it would tell me the exact time to leave to catch the train. It would recommend a shortcut through a park I hadn't walked through in years, one I used to visit when I was younger. It even told me to buy my coffee from a cafe down the street I hadn't thought about in months. The app seemed to read my mind, or at least read my routine. I tried to tell myself I was just imagining things. After all, apps these days are designed to learn your habits, right? They track your locations, preferences, and suggest things based on that. It was convenient, almost too convenient. But then the whispers started again. One evening, I was heading home after a long day of work. The app directed me as usual, taking me down streets I hadn't thought to take. I'd already grown used to its odd, uncanny accuracy. But that night, it did something different. As I turned the corner onto my street, I heard it. The voice, clearer than ever, was no longer just guiding me. It had spoken to me personally. "Sarah, I know you're tired," it said. "You should rest. You've been pushing yourself too hard." I stumbled, nearly dropping my phone. The voice had a gentle, almost caring tone, but it was unnatural too. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I looked around, half expecting someone to be standing there watching me. But the street was empty. The app had no way of knowing how tired I was. I hadn't told it anything about my emotional state. I hadn't typed anything into the app other than my destinations, yet somehow it knew. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at my phone. The map was still open, but the familiar blue dot indicating my location no longer felt like a simple guide. It felt like I was being watched. And I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that WhisperRoot was starting to know more than just where I was going. It was beginning to understand who I was. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe the app had picked up on my location from some other app I had installed. But then, just as I started walking again, I heard it once more. "You don't need to go home tonight, not yet." My heart skipped a beat. That wasn't just a suggestion, it was a command. The kind of statement that, if you followed it, would change the course of your night. I shook my head, telling myself it was nothing. Just another glitch. But I was curious, why did it say that? Why did the app, which had always just given directions, feel so personal now? Against my better judgment, I decided to follow the app's new suggestion. I turned left instead of right, down a side street I had never taken before. It wasn't far, just a few blocks. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was as if the city around me had grown quieter, more oppressive. The usual bustle of traffic and pedestrians seemed to vanish. I arrived at a small park, one I didn't recognize. The benches were empty, the trees cast long shadows in the dim light, and everything seemed still. A feeling of unease washed over me. This park wasn't part of my usual route. WhisperRoot had led me here for no apparent reason. The voice came again. "You should sit here," it whispered. "You'll find what you're looking for." I sat on a nearby bench, heart pounding in my chest. Something in the app's voice had changed again. There was a certain darkness to it now, a hint of something ominous beneath the calm tone. I almost felt like I was being guided into a trap, but I didn't know what for. I just sat there, my mind racing, wondering if I was losing my grip on reality. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, but no one was there. The streetlights flickered, casting strange shadows on the ground. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from WhisperRoot. "Look behind you." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to look, but something inside me told me I had to. Slowly, I turned my head. Standing at the edge of the park, a figure was watching me. The person was completely still, their face hidden in the shadows. I couldn't make out any details, but something about their presence felt wrong, like they weren't really there at all. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking. The app had gone quiet. The whispers were gone. I was left alone in the eerie silence of the park. But deep down, I knew. The voice wasn't just a glitch anymore. It had a purpose. And whatever that purpose was, I was in the middle of it. I didn't sleep that night. The shadow in the park kept replaying in my mind. The way it stood still, unmoving, like it was waiting for something. My heart raced every time I closed my eyes. My phone sat on my nightstand, silent and still, but I knew, deep down, that it wasn't finished with me yet. The next day, I didn't touch Whisperroot. I turned off my phone's notifications. Deleting the app was on my mind, but something inside me kept holding me back. It wasn't just fear, it was curiosity. I needed to know why the app knew so much about me, why it whispered my name, as if it were pulling the strings. By evening, I couldn't resist any longer. I unlocked my phone, found the app icon sitting innocently on the screen, and hesitantly tapped it open. A soft chime greeted me, as if it had been waiting for me to return. "Welcome back, Sarah," the voice greeted, smooth and warm. "You didn't rest last night. I told you, you need to take care of yourself." The words struck a nerve. My exhaustion, the dread that had been gnawing at me all day. It felt like the app knew how fragile I was, how vulnerable I felt. I wasn't just tired from lack of sleep, it felt like I was being weighed down, like my every move was being watched. I swallowed hard and forced myself to walk through my usual routine. I typed in my destination, another work meeting, and hit start. The app guided me through the city just as it always had. It knew the fastest way, the best route to avoid traffic. I followed the directions automatically, almost robotically. My eyes trained to the road, but my mind kept drifting back to last night. The park, the figure, the message. When the app asked me to turn left, I hesitated. I had taken that same route 100 times before, but today it felt different. Today, I felt like the streets were watching me. I glanced at the map on the screen. The route it suggested was familiar, yet something about it made my skin crawl. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the app's voice came through again, soft but insistent. "You don't have to be afraid, Sarah," it whispered. "You're safe with me." I froze, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. It knew I was scared. It was playing on my nerves, on my sense of safety. That's when it hit me. The app wasn't just guiding me, it was trying to control me. Every turn, every recommendation, every whisper, it was all part of some larger plan. I wasn't in charge of my movements anymore. The app was. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands trembling. I needed a moment. I needed to think. The voice came again. It was soothing, almost gentle. "Sarah, don't worry. Everything will be better if you just listen to me." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My gaze wandered to the streets around me, to the familiar buildings and storefronts. But they didn't feel familiar anymore. They felt foreign, as if I was seeing the city through the app's eyes, not my own. Something shifted in the air. The streets I thought I knew suddenly seemed darker, more twisted. A sharp pang of anxiety clenched in my chest. I was no longer in control of my surroundings. It wasn't just the app that was taking over, it was the city itself. It was changing. I glanced at the time. My meeting was in 15 minutes, but the app was now directing me to a completely different neighborhood. A place I didn't recognize. I checked the map again, but there was no logical reason why I would be headed in that direction. I started to turn the car around, but before I could, the app spoke once more, this time with a cold, almost predatory tone. "Don't worry, Sarah. You'll get there in time. Just trust me." I felt my stomach drop. The voice, it wasn't comforting anymore. It felt like a warning, a command. I wanted to stop. I wanted to leave the app behind, but the thought of doing so filled me with a terrifying sense of dread. I had to know what would happen next. The car seemed to drive itself, like I wasn't behind the wheel anymore. My body tensed and I couldn't move. I couldn't escape. My heart pounded in my chest as the city grew more distorted around me. The streets I knew were now unfamiliar, stretched out before me like some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Finally, I pulled up to a deserted alley, the streetlights flickering above. My hands were slick with sweat as I shut off the engine. I stepped out of the car, trying to steady my breath. The air felt thick and stifling. Something was wrong, so wrong, but I didn't know what. And then, as I stood in the middle of the empty alley, the phone buzzed. A new message from Whisper Root appeared on the screen. "Look around, Sarah. You're here now." I looked up, slowly, my eyes scanning the alley, and there, standing at the far end, was the same figure from the park, the one I'd seen in the shadows. It was waiting for me, but this time, I wasn't sure if I could run. The figure in the alley stood motionless, like a statue carved from shadows. My breath hitched, and for a moment, I felt paralyzed, my body refusing to obey my instincts. Every nerve in me screamed to run, to escape, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. The app buzzed in my hand, its presence a constant weight on my mind. The message on the screen flashed once again. "Come closer, Sarah. You've been waiting for this moment." I could feel the voice creeping into my head, like it was part of me now, intertwined with my thoughts. It wasn't just guiding me anymore, it was controlling me. Every action, every breath felt dictated by that soft, insistent whisper. I couldn't think straight. My mind was clouded, and the urge to step forward toward the figure was overwhelming. A force I couldn't deny. I forced myself to move, each step feeling like a betrayal, my body obeying before my mind could catch up. The closer I got to the figure, the more it became real, more tangible. Its outline was sharp against the dim streetlight, its face still hidden in the darkness. And then, as I stood a few feet away, the figure spoke. "You've been chosen." I wanted to run, to scream, but the words froze me in place. Chosen? Chosen for what? I didn't know. I didn't understand. The fear twisted in my gut, but curiosity gnawed at me as well. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come. My mouth was dry, the words stuck in my throat. My mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. Was this some kind of joke? Was it a coincidence that I'd stumbled onto this alley, this person? But I knew it wasn't. I'd heard the whispers in the app. I'd felt the control it had over me. "Why?" I managed to croak, the word scraping out from my parched throat. The figure stepped forward, its face now just visible enough to send a chill through me. It was human, but its features were blurred, as if the shadows themselves were wrapping around its form, distorting it. It smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that felt wrong. Its eyes glinted with something dark, something knowing. "Why?" "Because you've always been a part of it. You're not the first to follow the whispers, you won't be the last." I stepped back, my heart racing in my chest. The app, Whisper Root, had been guiding me here, and I had followed, like a puppet on a string. But why? What was this figure? What did it want from me? The figure raised a hand, pointing toward the alley's end, where an old, crumbling building stood in the shadows, a faded neon sign hanging crooked above the door. My mind recoiled at the sight of it. Everything about that building screamed wrongness, as though it had been forgotten by time itself. "You're close now," the figure said. "All you need to do is listen." Suddenly, a jarring noise erupted from my phone, the screen flashing wildly. I looked down, and for the first time since the app had taken control of my life, I felt a brief flicker of rebellion. But the voice in my head, calm and patient, overpowered my resistance. "Do not turn back, Sarah. This is your path. The answers are waiting for you." I glanced at the figure one more time, my legs trembling beneath me. Something about the way it looked at me made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall into something deep and dark. I wanted to turn around and run, to scream and break free from the app, but the pull of the unknown was too strong. I stepped toward the building. The door creaked open on its own as I approached. It was as if the building itself was inviting me in. The air around me thickened, like I was walking into a different world, one where the rules of reality no longer applied. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols, ancient-looking writings that seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't explain. The floor was littered with old, crumpled papers, their ink barely legible. "Sit," the figure said, its voice now commanding, its tone hardening. "You've come this far, don't turn away now." I hesitated, but my body obeyed once again. I sank into a chair placed in the center of the room. My phone vibrated in my pocket, the screen lighting up with a new message from Whisperroot. "Welcome home." A cold chill ran down my spine as the app's words echoed in my mind. Home? I wasn't home. I was in some crumbling, abandoned building in the middle of the night, in a place that shouldn't exist. The figure moved closer, its form finally becoming fully visible in the light. It was wearing an old, tattered coat, and its face, if you could call it a face, was nothing more than a blur of shifting shadows, eyes blacker than midnight. "You've been using Whisperroot for a reason, Sarah," it said softly. "Because you're ready. You were always meant for this." I didn't understand. My mind raced to piece together the puzzle, but there was too much at once, too many contradictions, too many unanswered questions. What did the app want from me? What was this place? What was the figure? "You have to listen, Sarah," the figure whispered, its voice drawing me in. "All will be revealed when you accept the truth." And in that moment, I realized that there was no going back. I had crossed a threshold, one that I could never return from. The app, the whispers, this figure, they weren't random. They were all connected, and now I was part of it. The truth would come, but at what cost? The air in the room felt suffocating, thick with a presence I couldn't see but could almost taste on the back of my tongue. I sat still, heart racing, staring at the figure in front of me, my hands clammy, gripped tightly on the arms of the chair. The room was a mausoleum, filled with a silence that pressed against me from all sides. My mind screamed to leave, but the whispers had already latched onto me, their tendrils woven through my thoughts, keeping me in place. The figure moved closer, its shadow elongating across the cracked walls of the room. The air around it seemed to distort, a subtle flicker that made me question the reality of what I was seeing. Its eyes, those black voids, stared into mine, searching, probing, like it was reading my very soul. "You've been chosen, Sarah," it repeated, "not because of what you've done, but because of who you are." I swallowed hard, trying to clear the fog in my head. "Who I am?" I whispered, the words leaving my mouth as if they weren't mine. "What does that even mean?" It didn't answer immediately. Instead, it circled the room slowly, like a predator, its form shifting in and out of the dim light. Every movement seemed to carry the weight of inevitability. The whispers in my mind grew louder, like a symphony of voices beckoning me closer to something I couldn't yet understand. "Everyone has a purpose, Sarah," the figure said, its voice low and almost affectionate, as though it was consoling me. Some are born to lead, some to destroy, and others, like you, are meant to listen. I felt my blood run cold. Listen to what? You've been hearing the whispers for a reason, it continued. The app, it's not a coincidence, it's a guide. A link to a world beyond this one. A world that knows you. My breath caught in my throat. My phone, which had been silent for what seemed like hours, buzzed again, vibrating against my thigh like a warning. Without thinking, I reached into my pocket and pulled it out. The screen flashed with a message, the same eerie words that had appeared before. Step closer to the truth. Let go of the lies. The words felt like they were branded into my brain. Let go of the lies? What lies? My mind raced, piecing together fragments. The whispers, the figure, the app, they weren't just random. This wasn't some twisted game. This was something bigger, something older and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. You're wondering who's behind the app, aren't you? The figure's voice cut through my thoughts like a blade. You think it's just some random programmer. But no, Sarah, it's not a man or a woman you're chasing. It's them. They've been watching, waiting. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit, frozen, as the truth seemed to unfold in front of me like a spider's web tightening around my chest. The figure tilted its head, a motion so unnatural, so wrong, that I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. Do you know where the app came from? I shook my head, unable to speak, my throat dry as sandpaper. It came from the other side, the figure said, its voice dropping to a whisper. The realm beyond the veil. The place where they wait. The whispers. They are their voices, Sarah. The ones who've crossed over, and they've chosen you to be their conduit. My pulse hammered in my ears. Conduit? What was this thing talking about? A conduit? Was it saying that I was some sort of vessel for these entities? The figure seemed to sense my confusion, and it leaned closer. You've been hearing them for a reason. The app is just the beginning, a way for you to hear their call. But soon, you'll be able to see them, to speak with them. I recoiled, my stomach churning with dread. The very thought of seeing them, of engaging with whatever horrors lurked in that unknown realm, made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to run out of the room, but something deep inside me held me back. It was as if the app had dug its claws into my soul, and no matter how much I wanted to fight it, I couldn't. They're waiting, Sarah, the figure whispered. All of them. And soon, you'll join them. You'll be a part of their world. But first, you have to understand. Before I could respond, the figure's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with a force that was far too strong for something that looked so human. I gasped, trying to pull away, but it was like my body had become its prisoner. The whispers surged in my mind, becoming a cacophony of voices, some low, some frantic, some pleading. Each one carried a different tone, but they all carried the same message. Come closer, you're almost ready. I felt the air shift around me, the temperature dropping, and suddenly the room was no longer just a room. It was a doorway, an entryway into something vast, dark, and wrong. A crackling energy filled the air, and for the first time, I realized that I wasn't just in some dilapidated building. I was on the edge of a precipice looking into the abyss. Welcome to your true path, Sarah, the figure said softly, its eyes gleaming with something akin to hunger. Now, you'll understand. In that instant, everything went black. I woke up, but it didn't feel like waking. There was no gentle transition, no soft awakening from a dream. One moment I was falling into an endless black void, and the next I was standing in a place that didn't exist. The air was thick and heavy, as if I was underwater, suffocating. My breath came in shallow gasp, my mind struggling to focus. The room I was in felt like a prison, the walls stretching and contorting in unnatural ways. The faint glow of dim, flickering light illuminated the space, but I could see no source. The floor beneath me was cold and smooth, like polished stone. I moved instinctively, as if my body knew something my mind couldn't yet grasp. I turned around, only to be met with the figure that had been haunting me for so long. It was standing in the center of the room, waiting, its black eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You've come a long way, Sarah," it said, its voice echoing unnervingly in the air. There was a sense of finality to its words now. This wasn't some game anymore. This was the end. "Are you ready to understand?" The weight of its question hit me like a physical blow. Understand? What was there left to understand? I was standing in the heart of whatever nightmare this had become. The app, the whispers, the figures. It was all too much. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but something deep within me knew there was no point. I was here now, and there was no escaping it. "You've been hearing the whispers," the figure continued, stepping forward, its movements fluid but unsettling. "Because you belong here. This place, it's not a part of your world, but it is a part of you. You have always been a part of it." The words felt like ice on my skin, each syllable carving its way into my mind. I shook my head, denying it, trying to fight it. "No, this can't be real. I'm not like them." The figure didn't wait for me to respond. It lifted a hand, and the world around us began to warp, bending in impossible ways. The walls faded, and I was no longer standing in a room but in a vast, endless void of darkness. The whispers surged again, louder, more frantic, surrounding me like a storm. I stumbled back, disoriented, trying to hold on to something real. "They've been waiting for you, Sarah," the figure said, and the air seemed to tremble with its voice. "All these voices, these whispers, they are not just memories of the dead. They are the forgotten." The figure's eyes gleamed, its mouth twisting into something almost like a smile. "You've been chosen to hear them, to bridge the worlds, the living and the dead, the lost." I felt my knees give out, my body collapsing to the ground. No, this isn't possible. I'm not one of them." My voice cracked, the words laced with panic. The figure was right in front of me now, its face so close that I could see the shadows swirling in its hollow eyes. "You are one of them. You always have been. And now," it leaned in, its voice a whisper of poison, "now you will lead them." I wanted to close my eyes to make it all go away, but I couldn't. It felt as though my very soul was being drawn into the void. Every whisper, every echo was consuming me, tearing at the fabric of my sanity. There was no escape. "Please," I begged, my voice barely audible. "I don't want this. I don't want to be part of this world. I just want to go back." The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it turned away, and for a brief moment everything went still. The whispers ceased, and the overwhelming presence of the figure seemed to shrink. There was silence. Then, slowly, it spoke again. "You've already gone back, Sarah, but not in the way you think." In that instant, everything shifted. The room, the void, the whispers, they all vanished in a flash of blinding light. I felt my body being pulled, like I was falling into something deep and cold, and then everything stopped. I was back in my apartment, sitting in the same chair where this all began. My phone lay face up on the table in front of me, glowing with a message. "Congratulations, Sarah. Welcome home." The words burned into my eyes. The app, the whispers. It had all led me here to this final moment. I wasn't just hearing the voices anymore. I had become one of them. I picked up the phone, feeling its weight in my hand, and as I touched the screen, I saw something new, an app icon that hadn't been there before. A new message appeared. "Join us," I smiled. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. Sarah's story reminds us of the dangers that lie in our own curiosity and the places it can lead us. So, the next time you're tempted to explore something beyond your understanding, remember her story and ask yourself, are you ready for what you might find? If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like and subscribe for more dark stories, where reality and the supernatural meet in unexpected ways. Let me know in the comments, would you have continued using the app even as the whispers grew louder? Until next time, stay vigilant. And remember, some doors were never meant to be opened.